Let's start.
Okay, so hello everybody. Thank you for joining us. Today we have Beata Orlecka Sikora. So please, Beata, the floor is yours. We will have some time for discussing and for questions at the end of the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Savka and Alex, for inviting me, and especially I'm grateful to you because probably people do not know that Savka and Alex accepted, I think, 4 or even more times the changes of the time of day of the presentation. Today I would like
Beata,
to...
sorry, Beata. I will start the recording now.
Okay. I would like to present the results of our recent studies. The title is Multiscale Seismic Indicators of Damage Accumulation and Stress Redistribution. And before I start, I would like to also acknowledge my co-authors. Everything what I will present today comes from the work of the whole group, and even more people than they are mentioned here on the slide. Stan Lasocki, Tassos Kostaglu, Helena Ciechowska, Zhenyu Zhang, Zhiming Liang, José Augusto Fonseca, Anderson do Nascimento, Alessandro Vuan, Mateusz Olszewski, Igor Szumny, Francis Tong, and also Eleftheria Papadimitriou and Vasilis Karakostas from Thessaloniki of University of Thessaloniki, also Ramon Zuiga from UNAM in Mexico, and also I would like to thank Alice Gabriel and Kadek Palungadi for sharing data concerning dynamic rupture simulations, and I will show in a moment. Okay, I would like to start from one of the concepts of earthquake preparation process, which was introduced by Yehuda Ben-Zion and Aitaro Kato. Here is the scheme of this concept, progressive localization of shear deformation, which was published in Nature Review in 2021. And this concept grew up in evidence, observations from laboratory experiments and also from real tectonic seismogenic zones and also anthropogenic seismicity cases that volumetric deformation precedes strong earthquakes, and this deformation transition to shear localization, and then we expect failure. And if we look at the earthquake preparatory process through this concept, we have to concentrate on the larger, wider time scales. So we will not look at the fault alone, but at the larger area. And here there is seismicity, which is related to reservoir impoundment at Koyna and Varna in India. And I think for people who deal with anthropogenic seismicity, this very well-known case. In 1967, there was the largest earthquake triggered by reservoir, the magnitude, reservoir impoundment, the magnitude was 6.3. And after that time, Professor Harsh Gupta established Koyna as a global reference site for reservoir-triggered seismicity. And his group built 3-kilometer pilot borehole observatory, and they had a lot of information about the seismic process in that place. Also, a lot of knowledge about the changes in rocks and also changes in permeability, porosity. So, in one moment, in some cases, you see on the right side, the group was able to identify the seismic deformation before stronger earthquakes. This acceleration of seismicity was identified as a nucleation process for some earthquakes, and the forecast for some strong earthquakes was successful. And I think that anthropogenic seismicity gives a very unique opportunity to study earthquake preparatory process. The system is forced. The geometry of the seismogenic zone and also size of the impacted area is limited. So from one point of view, we would expect that earthquake preparatory process will be much more clear than in natural tectonic settings. But from the other point of view, we know that anthropogenic seismicity is impacted by technological factors which change in time, and also by the mixture of drivers of rupture growth. And these features of anthropogenic seismicity and their seismogenic zones complicates these preparatory processes of earthquakes. Anyway, when we look at the reservoir impoundment, reservoir triggered seismicity, and we see a very well documented nucleation, forest shock activity, and also prolonged phases of earthquake preparation, I think that still we can consider reservoir impoundment seismicity as very well test beds to study such preparatory processes. Especially because reservoir impoundment seismicity is related to impoundment of reservoir, and also this impoundment, I would say, loading changes not so fast like in other cases. Most existing approaches rely on phenomenological indicators. For example, there is some evidence that seismic activity rate changes before large earthquake, B-value, clustering of seismicity. But still, there is lack of scalable descriptions of damage evolution. And here I would like to mention the last review of Patricia Garçon-Mendez and Prioli, when they analyze various concepts of earthquake preparatory processes, but finally they arrive to the conclusion that in some cases the precursors can be monitored, can be observed, but these are usually site-specific. So now the question is how we can track the evolution of damage in a way that is physically meaningful and comparable across scale. And to answer to this question, I turn to laboratory experiments which were performed by Thomas Gebel and his colleagues, because laboratory experiments provide opportunity to monitor whole evolution of damage and all parameters which we usually measure in real seismicity can be directly linked to particular stages of damage. And what is interesting, Thomas and colleagues try to understand the behavior of parameters of seismic process and during the damage, during the stick slip experiments, and assess their potential as a precursor. And they arrive to the conclusion that shallow depth, high damage, and low stiffness and low fluid pressure lead to long preparatory periods with pronounced foreshock before failure. This is the upper left corner. So for such conditions, there is long periods for where we can observe foreshocks. So if we can observe foreshocks, and if earthquake preparation is an evolution from distributed to localized inelastic deformation, then we can treat seismicity as a sampling of the evolving strain rate. This means that the key observable is how seismic strain is released in time and how the variability of this release is evolves. And this directly leads to our approach when we propose two metrics to measure seismic strain rate and its spatial variability. And to do this, let's define some new parameters. Here on the left upper corner, you see 3 earthquakes, and they are described in the seismic catalog by time of occurrence and location and magnitude. And we would like to know the rate of deformation. Here we will use the seismic moment rate. We would like to know how much time passes between 2 consecutive earthquakes. So we define waiting time, the inter-event time between 2 consecutive earthquakes. We also would like to understand how far apart are 2 consecutive earthquakes. So for that, we define inter-event distance. And also we would have information about the size of earthquake. So at T2, we have 3 parameters: inter-event time between second and first earthquake, inter-event distance between second and first, and magnitude of second earthquake. At the time point 3, we have inter-event time between third earthquake and second, inter-event distance between third and second, and magnitude 3, and so on. And we, from the basic seismic catalog, we have new point process. And based on this new time series, let's say, we define 2 metrics. The first is the Seismic Strain Dynamic Coefficient, and we calculate the value of SSD in event window. And we have another parameter, which is Seismic Regularity Coefficient, is the average distance between cap points in the moving window. And now when you see at the parameters, they represent different scales. So we use the transformation to equivalent dimension, which was introduced by Stanisław. So each parameter is transferred to its probability distribution, cumulative distribution function. And then we calculate the average distance between points in the window. And now I would like to explain a little more what this parameter exactly means, because this is not so intuitive. So let's look at the left side of this diagram. In the upper part, you have a seismic regularity parameter, which is equal 0. What it means? It means that all earthquakes have the same size. They occurred with the same inter-event time, and they occurred with the same inter-event distance. When we want to plot them in the 3D space, 3D graph MCDR-DT, they form very clustered points. If we have seismic regularity coefficient higher than 0, it means that earthquakes can have different magnitudes. They could occur at different inter-event times, and they also have different inter-event distances. So again, in this 3D space, we will observe this time scatter points. So we can say that the lower DC, we have higher degree of regularization of damage style. And later I will show you that it means that we have lower spatial variance of deformation. Okay, so we identified two metrics, and we tested the behavior of this metrics based on laboratory experiments data. And as a first example, we used the data which come from the experiment performed by Kwiatek and Thomas from GFZ. This is westerly granite. Here is the information about the sample, but I will not provide more details because this experiment and the data have been widely published and used in other studies, and they are really good quality information which can be used by researchers. And based on this data, based on information from catalog, we noticed that in each stick slip experiment, our metrics, SSD and DC, behaves in very similar very similar. And of course, the amplitudes of these two parameters changes during the various stick slip experiments, and this is clearly related to roughness of the plane of the fault. But generally, we could identify. I selected here the stick slip experiment from the period in the middle of the whole experiment to present how is the shape of the behaviors, of the trajectories of DC and SSD. Then we analyzed the different damage models which came from laboratory experiments, and we matched model and behavior of SSD DC behavior, and we proposed the behavior of these two parameters related to particular stage of damage model. So we have here a 5-stage damage model, and the most important for us, after our experience, we see that the most important is the transition between third and fourth stage, when we can say that we change that the style of deformation changes from distributed to more localized, and we can identify this moment easily when analyze real data sets. Here, later we also proved that these two parameters can be related to inelastic strain rate, and when we assume, based on three assumptions which are widely accepted in seismology and also confirmed by other studies, we can arrive to the conclusion that DC represents the function of spatial variance of mean inelastic strain rate. Here is the full formula. Okay, so we have two parameters, DC, which captures variability in time, space, magnitude, and SSD, which measures acceleration of deformation, and together they provide chance to identify strain localization before failure. And here I would like to present you the first examples based on dynamic rupture cascades, which Alice, Gabriel, and Kadek Palgunadi shared the data with me. And first example shows, I will show only, there are simulations done by a group of Alice. And the first case is fault embedded in smaller fractures, network of fractures, and ruptures on smaller networks triggers also a big fault. And the second case is different. Ruptures in fracture networks do not trigger big earthquake rupture on the main fault. And I would like to present you the results. And here are results for 4 cases. First, I would like to explain that each case represents different conditions, and the conditions, telling conditions means that they represent different pre-stress fracture networks, different orientation, optimally oriented, not optimally oriented, fracture energy, low fracture energy, higher fracture energy. But generally, what we can see when we transfer this information to real observations, we can say that some of cases represent more swarm-like seismicity, the other represent more matured faults. But when we look at the behavior of these two parameters, SSDS and DC, we see that before largest earthquakes in the catalog, always we see very low value of DC, and this is related with highest amount of deformation. The density map, which is in the background of these 4 graphs, represents the distance from hypocenter. And what is also interesting, the shapes of behavior is so characteristic that based on dynamic rupture simulations and laboratory experiments, we made some tests with artificial intelligence approach to identify the conditions of seismogenic zones which experience kind of behavior of these 2 parameters. And the first trials were quite interesting. And here are the examples coming from laboratoristic sleep experiments, the same which I presented earlier. The data are from Thomas Gebel et al. And again, you can see that before largest earthquakes, which are here marked by white and light gray dots, we observe low DC value and also very characteristic SSD behavior depending on the conditions under which the experiment was performed, because here, for example, we have dry undamaged on the left upper corner. B example is fluids at low pore pressure thermally damaged. C represents fluids at low pore pressure undamaged. D represents fluid at high pore pressure and thermally damaged. Then this was more than 4 samples. I checked, I think, more than different 12 samples, and I try to summarize in the same way as Thomas summarized. And again, we can observe that when we have low fluid pressure, high damage and roughness, we can observe prolonged minima of DC. We can observe very long preparatory processes with very clear strain hardening. So to summarize, we can say that exactly the same as observed Thomas, for the same conditions, our preparatory processes identified by these 2 metrics, SSD and DC, are much longer than in other conditions. Okay, so now let's move to anthropogenic seismicity data. And here I would like to present you some examples which come from our episodes platform. And I selected Pertusillo Lake. Pertusillo Lake, this is a reservoir in Italy. Second example comes from Vietnam. Seismicity is related to reservoir impoundment in Chongqing 2. The third example is related to geothermal seismic activity in the geysers in US. And the last examples come from copper ore mine in Poland. And here is the example from Pertusillo Lake. The data are, I use the data not only from our platform, but also from Luisa Valoroso. They provided access to enriched seismic catalog, and to study this preparatory process, I used catalog provided by Luisa's group. And here you can see red color means the behavior of SSD parameter. The green one is the DC. And before two dots, two stars, yellow stars are the strongest earthquakes recorded in the catalog. And you can see that before these earthquakes, we again see a low value of DC. So we are able to more or less identify the transition to fourth stage of damage, and also the transition to last stage of damage. Here it was 39 days before a strong earthquake. Here is the example. On the left side, you can see example from Legnica Głogów copper district related to copper ore mine in one of the field 20/1. And here also the picture is very clear. I would say that even I was surprised because the seismicity in mining, everybody who has experience with seismicity in mines, they know that the process is very complex. There is interactions between seismicity coming from different panels, many impacting factors. But again, the picture is very clear. And before largest earthquake, in the catalog, we see a very deep value minimum of DC. At the same time, we see increase of SSD. And this moment was 18 days before this strong earthquake. And here is the example on the right side from the geysers. And again, before very strong earthquake, we see very deep minimum of DC, and SSD behaves in the same way as in case of laboratory experiment data. So I come now to Koina-Varna region again. And thanks to catalog shared by Sashida and colleagues, I calculated also the behavior of these two parameters for reservoir impoundment seismicity for this region. And here you can see the different trajectories of DC for different calculation sets. So the shape is almost similar, but to see that when we, how stable are the results. So it doesn't matter if we take 15 events, 100 events, 70 events in the window, more or less the shape and the moment of minimum of DC and maximum increase of SSD is in the same place. But, during the presentation and discussions in India, one colleague asked me how it would be when we apply this procedure in progressive matter. And here I prepared him the presentation, and here you can see how it would look when we recalculated this every time when new earthquake would occur. The shape is very similar, almost the same. And when we see very deep DC, we can recognize that we are at the beginning of one of the last damage stages. And here is very interesting situation, because when you look at the model, we can see that that the whole period here mimics the behavior, the model behavior of DC. And what is interesting, the first earthquake here occurred in Koina reservoir area, and the next three occurred in the region of Varna. And this first three earthquakes were related to very fast reservoir impoundment. But the last one occurred when the reservoir was filled and the loading conditions were stable and did not change in time. Here is the summary once again, final picture. And we also try to make some exercises to link time of the onset of fourth and fifth stage of damage with magnitude. And we find some relations which link time and magnitude. But now after experience, I can say that the most important here is stable loading. So for anthropogenic seismicity, it is very difficult to get stable conditions, but there is chance that for seismogenic zones, natural seismogenic zones, we will be able to find relations between time and magnitude. And at the end, I would like to show you examples from natural seismicity, because this is what I presented so far is not observed only in laboratory and anthropogenic seismicity, but also the group led by Stan Lasocki made a lot of work related to natural earthquakes. And here are some examples. Here is the first plot shows the large earthquakes 8.2 in Mexico, Tehuantepec. The second is from Samos in Greece. And the third one is Landers. And you can see that the DC minimum is very clear and very well, very easy to identify this moment of preparatory process. And here on the right side, there is example coming from Santorini seismic crisis from last year. And also again, you see that before almost each strong earthquake of magnitude around 5, we were able to identify the moment when we can expect this earthquakes based on minimum DC. And the last example comes from last year Myanmar earthquake of magnitude 7.7. This work was published, I think, this week, and it shows the behavior of these two parameters, SSD and DC, before this earthquake. And the blue one is DC, the magenta is SSD. The map in the background represents the density of seismicity, horizontal difference from centroid to get better visualization of distribution of seismicity. And what is interesting here, there are two periods marked by TP1 and TP2, which are interesting from the point of view of behavior of these two metrics. The first one, we see that there is minimum of DC. We also observe very strong earthquake here, close to 6. But then seismicity come back to the normal level. And again, in TP2, we see very low DC. Then DC grows up and the large earthquake occurs. But here I would like to also stress your attention to these two clusters of density. When we see at the location of these earthquakes, the red one on the right side are related to the period 1 and the green one to the period 2. And we try to understand the behavior of the seismicity. And I found last year the study from Bianchi et al. When they made the laboratory experiments and analyzed the dilatance zone before failure. And they arrived to the conclusion that runaway failure and accelerated seismicity are triggered only when a seismic damage leads to the development of dilatational zones that intersect the sample boundaries, establishing a coherent and unconfined slip pathway. And I think that our migration of seismic density to far fields, here is up 800 kilometers, reflects a large-scale version of the results which were presented by Bianchi and et al. And I think that here in the laboratory experiments of Bianchi et al., when the deformation reached the boundary of a sample, it lost the confinement and the shear zone localized, seismicity localized, and there was a failure. And here I think that we could also identify, interpret that here we observe similar behavior, but in the regional tectonic system scale. And here I think that when the seismicity jumped into the boundaries of the tectonic systems and system has lost its ability to support the accumulation of strain, the shear zone could localize and large earthquake would occur. And we also made some preliminary examples related to relation between magnitude and time of minimum of DC parameters. And this is all what I want to say. That to summarize, I want to say that earthquake preparation is the transition from spatially distributed inelastic deformation to localized shear controlled by the mean rate and spatial variability of strain accumulation. And I think that for us, the most important is that we find two metrics, SSD and DC, which are based only on basic seismic catalog. And what is very interesting, they can be applied across the scale from laboratory to very large earthquakes, and they behave in very similar way. We believe that the real-time tracking of these parameters trajectories, when combined with existing forecasting approaches, has the potential to increase probability gain in earthquake forecasting. Of course, this is very important to understand very well seismogenic zone segmentation of faults. So this is something which is now very deeply analyzed, and that's why we rely very much on people which are specialists in tectonics and geology. Thank you.